Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. We're just going to wait a minute or two and let people join, and then we'll get started. Okay, it looks like we've got a good group of people on already, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thanks everyone for joining us today. We're so pleased to have panelists with us here today from PGA Tour and Hudl, covering the elements of creating a winning cybersecurity playbook, from mastering the game through incident response planning, uniting their teams with a collaborative environment, and more. If you have any questions that come up throughout the discussion, please drop them in the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to address them at the end. If there's not enough time, we can't get through all of them, we will make sure to follow up via email on those. So with that, I'll hand it over to Nabil to kick off introductions.
Thank you so much, Julie. Hello, everybody. Really excited to be here and to have this conversation today with our guests. We have Rob and Jay. Rob's from Hudl and Jay is from PGA Tour. Super excited for our conversation today on how to master the game in the space of cybersecurity. So let's get started. I'm your host. My name is Nabil Hannan. I am the field CISO at NetSPI, and I've been working in the cybersecurity space now for over 16 years. Before that, I've done work in software development and product management, and overall been in the tech space, breaking things since I was 7 years old. And let's talk to our guests and get to know them a little better, and then we'll get started. So Rob and Jay, do you want to quickly introduce yourselves?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Nabil. Hello, everyone. Robert LaMagna-Reiter, Chief Information Security Officer at Hudl, where I have a unique opportunity to help support the security program where we're giving every athlete the shot that they deserve. I've been in the security realm for nearly 18 years and have had the opportunity to serve in multiple verticals and organization sizes and have led and built several programs. But at Hudl, I'm responsible for leading security and GRC teams. So that encompasses our technical engineering, architecture, operations, incident response, as well as our governance, risk compliance, audit, and privacy and regulatory obligations and customer trust program. So quite the task, but it's an exciting organization to work with, an exciting vertical, and I love our mission. Excited to have a conversation today.
Hi, I'm Jay Oliva. I'm in charge of cybersecurity for the PGA Tour. So that's encompassing all of the fun and exciting tournaments that we put on pretty much every week, making sure that we've got everything in place in the event of anything going wrong, that we can react to it and make sure our broadcasts, our scores, and all the other things that our fans rely on are available to them. Before this, I was working in nonprofit spaces, from everything doing software development and infrastructure work to data analysis and all sorts of other fun little things along the road. I've been doing cybersecurity now essentially since the BBS days, having been a sysop back in the day for those who are old enough to remember dial-up and that sort of thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Really excited, obviously, to have this conversation. We'll try to hit on some specific themes around sports as we continue the conversation. The first theme I want to focus on is mastering the game, which is really understanding planning and best practices around improving your incident response and planning process. So let's start maybe by talking about if you can outline some key components of your organization's incident response plan and why you decided to take such an approach. Rob, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, happy to. So before even getting to incident response, one of the things that sits at the foundational level for our plans and processes is it's all around asset management, visibility, and being business process aware with the criticality of understanding what's going on in the business. With that understanding, we developed our incident response plan from the inside out, and then layered in recommendations. We heavily leverage NIST standards as frameworks to build and grow and mature our program. So you think about incident response and management, in any of the Hudl specific, organization or customer specific requirements that we've layered on top of the generic NIST recommendations and frameworks. And so to summarize, we generally account for, preparation, detection, analysis, containment, eradication, recovery, all the wonderful NIST buzzwords, and tailor those to our organization's, of course, capabilities, risk tolerance levels, and customer requirements.
What about you, Jay?
I think one of the biggest things that I've always tried to focus on when I'm building these sort of plans is making sure that we know who to talk to when. One of the biggest ones, of course, is making sure that we're involved with our cybersecurity insurance companies, right, at the right time, which is pretty much almost immediately depending on the incident. So that's kind of where my focus lies, in making sure that we have cadences, making sure that we have proper handoffs, making sure that we're doing things at the right times, and everybody knows what those things are and when they're expected, because that way we can make sure that we're moving through the process of getting to that remediation stage quicker and smoother. So that's kind of where I focus on, as well as making sure that everybody understands their own responsibilities. Like it's so important when you're walking through the chaos of an incident to know what is it, where are my lines, where am I going to be taking care of things, and where do I need to hand them off to somebody else or some other group to get these things resolved, and those groups then picking up that ball and running with it.
You mentioned something, Jay, that's interesting. I think more and more organizations are starting to work much more closely with cyber insurance providers and their cyber insurance policy to determine how to approach certain challenges. I'd be curious, first of all, if you have any guidance on what are some things to be mindful of when having those interactions, but also, are there any industry specific considerations that you have to be mindful of that's unique within your vertical?
I mean, the main unique thing is we have to consider massive different privacy laws all over the place. So that's the biggest constraint and the biggest time suck when you're looking at where are we focusing response around, because it's all going to be around data. Who owns the data? Is the data in the right location based on geographic requirements and all that fun stuff? So that's one of the big things. And then that also kind of plays into how you respond to it. With the cybersecurity insurance firms, I like to always keep an incident retainer handy with one of the firms that's already been approved by the cybersecurity insurance company. The reason being is that it helps reduce some of that draw time in getting to forensics being involved or any other additional capabilities that you may not have internally brought to bear. The sooner you get that done, the sooner you can actually start remediating stuff or at least stopping the bleed. So that's kind of where the focus comes there when you're dealing with the cybersecurity insurance companies, is knowing that who you're going to be working with from the very beginning and having that established beforehand, knowing when you're going to actually contact the insurance company and contacting them first, even though you have that retainer in place, because most insurance companies are going to say, hey, we're the ones that are going to manage all that. We're going to pull in legal, even if you have your own internal legal teams, we're going to pull in the forensics team. And they'll work off your retainer, but having all those relationships in place beforehand, it saves you time. And that's, in an incident, the biggest killer is not having enough time, because there's 24 hours in a day, and I do like to try to at least get 4 or 5 hours of sleep during an incident. So it's important to have all that established beforehand.
Yeah, I can't reiterate enough a lot of what Jay focused on there. Those that have cyber insurance or are seeking to increase cyber insurance really take a look at how you can augment your faster response capabilities, because a lot of cyber providers may have bench strength from a lot of firms that they work with that are approved, but there's usually a waiting period, right? They have a lot of processes they have to follow, but if you have an approved vendor that they'll accept their incident forensic process, they can get the process started on the cyber insurance side, but you can begin working the investigation, the containment, et cetera, with that firm. And retainer hours and retainer sizes can vary. So you can usually tailor those to your response times, the level of involvement you need. You can buy anything from a bucket of hours, having a dedicated contact line. They can get real flexible with you. And that allows you to also be a bit more nimble and specific when you're working with your carrier limits, your policy, what they want to cover, what they don't want to cover, because that can be an art in itself, tailoring exactly what you need for your business. So it's imperative that they're also adept to your industry's specifics. So as Jay mentioned, privacy regulations galore are also the fun nuance that us at Hudl work with on the global basis. And then you add the different layer for underage individuals have an additional set of privacy regulations beyond the geographic ones, and making sure that we're taking that into account as we're working through all of our processes, making sure that we know who to call when an event potentially turns into an incident and the severity.
So
yeah,
beyond
one thing,
yeah, go ahead, Jay.
well, one thing to also remember is that retainer, like a lot of times they'll let you use that for other activities as you get kind of towards the end of the year. Tabletop exercises are great. Maybe depending on the firm, they're able to do additional testing for you and things like that, because that goes back into getting into a feedback loop of testing your plans and all that sort of thing that you need to constantly be thinking of as well.
You took the question right away from me, Jay, which is, if we take a step back before an incident occurs, obviously cyber insurance is a part of being prepared for when an incident happens. But what are some other activities that you recommend or you're actively pursuing as part of your playbook to be prepared for an incident?
From my side, I think the biggest thing we try to do is try to get tabletops going. We look at scenarios, we try to figure out, what's going to happen, and then try to play it as close as we can. We look for even oddball things to happen. What happens if we lose a primary connection to an event? What are our backup strategies? What can we do to make sure that we are able to restore internet quickly? Who do we call? That sort of thing. And kind of having those playbooks put forward beforehand, and then running them, testing them, finding out what is the gap in this and what can we do better. Even doing something as simple as playing backdoors and breaches. It's a little card game that you can pick up. Trying to think about things that could happen out of the box, so that way you can prepare for those oddball things. And you're not going to be 100% prepared. Like that's not possible. But if you can at least have an idea of what to do in the worst case situation, then at least you have a path. And having that path is kind of how you get from that worst day of your life to getting back to healthy. And that's the track you have to take with an incident. Is it's going to be bad sometimes, and you're just going to have to grit your teeth, get through it, and then move to the next piece of it and continue to work the cycle until you get done.
Rob, anything else from your side to add to that, to be prepared for an incident?
I mean, that was phenomenal dive. If I'm wanting to just expand upon it, some of the things that we've leveraged have been partnership with the rest of the organization. And what I mean by that is ensuring that the micro or the smaller trainings that we deploy through the organization are awareness and education focused, so that we're never going to prevent or stop or see absolutely everything. But the more we can have folks be aware and follow the mantra, see something, say something, report it, that helps expand my team's capability, what we're able to cover, because there are a lot of potential incidents that may not come across a normal, incident response plan or system alert, you name it, that you're relying on people to report suspicious calls or smishing or you name it. And so working with the organization to help act as a data feed to my team helps us maintain that situational awareness. And then one of the communication mechanisms that has become key to our team having in the back pocket is, secure out-of-band communications that reside outside of the organization. A good example is, the insider threat or persistence is established. In a worst-case scenario, you have some method that you can rely on the integrity and the confidentiality of your communications and the responsiveness that your teams can operate if the primary mechanism, like Slack or Teams or whatnot, has been potentially poisoned, compromised. You can't rely on it. You don't want somebody spying on how your team's operating. So keeping in mind, depending on the severity of the incident, keeping in mind your processes, having something that you can rely upon to foster communications in a secure and fast manner.
So if I can expand on that then, Rob, we all understand inherently that humans are good at doing certain things, but it's very hard to scale humans across large environments or large organizations. So you often have to rely on tools and technologies to help you in all of these activities, especially in particular to detecting or early detection of incidents. Are there certain tools or technologies that you really like or you're seeing as an up and coming trend in the industry that you've been using, and you would maybe have some stories around it that you could share?
That's quite the question, Nabil. So if I'll answer it with how we're approaching it and our thoughts and methodology, because there's a lot of different ways we could tackle that. And well, the first answer is we'll take the cop out that it's a blend between people, process, and technology. So first we rely on people to notify us timely, wanting to capture as much information as possible, like I mentioned. But then we focus on collecting a wide variety of telemetry that supports visibility across the enterprise. One of our first tasks when building the program at Hudl was understand the business to a degree, hopefully better than they understand how they operate, so that when we're building our controls and collection points from the inside out based on business processes, we know what and how things should function, because that's key to identifying the severity of incidents. In a lot of cases is deviation from normal, and so knowing how like a business workflow and its criticality should operate, we lean towards playbook execution off of telemetry to focus on only the most critical events, right, and have that cascading downwards. We do not rely as much on traditional SIMs, right? I'm a big fan of stitching together playbooks and a mixture of low code or even full-on store automation where the data resides, right? So the technology has gotten much better. Pick your vendor. I'm not going to go into vendor names here, but you can stitch together data sources depending on your firm's operating model and leverage the telemetry that already exists in your AWS and your SaaS environments within some sort of log repository. You don't have to continuously and always collect it back to traditional SIM. There's comparable methods to deploying and executing playbooks. And so our engineers' time is mostly focused on security automation, tweaking playbooks, working with our DevOps engineers, making sure that they're also executing traditional SOAR through Zapier, through independent playbooks that are plugged into the different tool sets. So there's no one answer, but that's in a general sense how we're approaching it, trying to leverage the limited human capital that we're all facing, that resource scarcity, and trying to leverage the capabilities of the platforms that exist.
Jay, would you add anything to that?
Yeah, I think one of the big trends that I'm seeing that was probably talked about quite a bit by a few people at like Black Hat and DEF CON just recently is getting more into putting in deception technologies. And that's one of the things that we're trying to figure out, how we plug it in right. Because at the end of the day, the best trip wires you're going to have in your environment are people actively attacking something. And the only way you're going to know that something's happening is somebody's actively attacking something. And you make it the lowest hanging fruit. You make it the thing that the script kiddie is going to be able to go after, right? And then by doing that, that triggers the alarms. That sends off all the bells and whistles. I love the idea of bringing everything as close to the source as possible. That's it's just like with networking, right? You want to put the ACL as close to the source as possible. Same thing with alerting, right? You want it to fire and trigger and then log somewhere else. So that way you've always got access to it and you're always firing things as quickly as possible, not waiting for necessarily a detection engine to finally run through that 2-3 terabytes of data that you've pulled in for the day. So you want that as close as possible to happen as quickly as possible. But that deception technology, that's the thing that I think is going to give the most value going forward. So looking at different honeypot options and different ways that can be included in vendor solutions, I think is kind of where I'm going to start looking at a lot of my evaluations as I look at new products and things like that.
Well, I know we could probably continue on this topic for a long time, but I do want to make sure we pick your brains on a few of the other themes that I wanted to cover today. So if we can move to the next theme, which is around uniting the team, really understanding how you bridge the gap between the offensive and the defensive and what approaches you're taking. So I'll start off with a question for you, Jay. Is what type of positions do you typically have within your organization? And also, how are you determining the balance and approach you take to what type of activities you want to perform internally within your teams versus what other activities you want to use external teams, tools, or vendors for? What approach are you taking in making those decisions?
So to start off, we do have kind of a smaller team that we are looking to expand. And if you happen to want to come work for the tour, potentially in 2024, there should be some postings maybe as we look at what we're going to be moving towards. One of our primary focuses is making sure that we have analysts that are validating the information that's coming in. All the various alerts are being looked at. They're also involved in the GRC process and trying to make sure that our controls are being met the way we expect them to be met. We have a specialist and an administrator that are going through and continuously tuning our solutions, looking at our vulnerabilities, making sure that the other teams are performing their part of the process. We do a whole lot of audit focus and then taking those findings and then pushing them over to the correct groups. And trying to run those teams. I mean, in some ways, our security group works almost more like a project management group that has some technical functions, but we're primarily building the work and getting the work in front of the people that are going to actually do the remediation efforts. So from that standpoint, that's what we do internally. From the external side, we lean on multiple partners. We lean on a 24/7 SOC that's provided to us by a vendor. Who's doing a great job of analyzing the information. We utilize MDR technologies that are able to go ahead and address and remediate events that are happening on endpoints so that we can isolate those endpoints and then have our internal teams communicate to those individuals who have had an isolated endpoint, ship them back to home, and we re-image them, ship them right back. Our turnaround on that is usually about a day. So we're able to resolve threats pretty quickly by utilizing those third parties to feed into that communication loop and making sure that we're able to get the right people alerted and notified at the right time so that the things that need to happen.
What about you, Rob? What's your perspective on that topic?
Jay, of course, answered it fabulously. So, I'll build upon and add into ways that, we're facing a lot of the same challenges. Actually, I want to say most organizations, I think, are facing the challenge when it comes to the timing and level of skill set that blends into business needs. So we're all working under that constraints on how we can deliver the best value, adhere to our incident notification timelines, and we're accomplishing that through, again, the partner space for the technical capabilities that that's not what we sought out to build internally. We're not experts at that, so we're going to rely on the experts that live and breathe threat hunting and rapid response, backed up by our folks who know our environment the best, right? And so what does that roles and accountabilities matrix look like that governs that relationship? I think of our team, we tried to embed them, think of us as like a product security team, and the product is the organization, both our internal processes and our customer applications. And so we're weeding our design standards, and we're weeding thought processes into everything from design to build to scoping to acceptance to QA, and trying to push security as a de facto responsibility throughout the organization. That's one of the force multipliers we're relying on to do the offense and defense, right? I'm a big believer that the more you can do correctly up front, the less times you give yourself to trip over a rock once things are into production or once something's deployed. the more effective your team can be when needing to be on defense. So we put on offense. We put a lot on that defense, the hardening, the standards, the education up front, trying to extract a lower likelihood that a successful attack will, result in major disruption. I think we're all aware that there's events and there's incidents and attacks, all day, every day. And our responsibilities are to manage that level of risk, respond accordingly. And that's what we're trying to blend together. We do also leverage peer networking groups. So for example, Slack communities where you have brilliant red, blue, or purple team engineers that can rapidly share information. I know it's not quite the same. They're not quite an extension of your team, but there are certain confidentiality provisions that they operate by when they're trying to share intel, almost in an ISAC light format, right? Where it's not as formal as a, financial services or a healthcare, you name it, information sharing group. But we've developed and created and operate our own information sharing groups. And that's worked out well when looking at something that might be novel or, alerting others to be on the lookout.
So both of you've added a lot of context around how you're collaborating and partnering with, other groups and third parties to help you in making decisions and protecting your organizations. I would also be curious to understand what type of activities do you find effective in bridging the gap internally within the organization, but across different departments, understanding that, collaboration, education, and all those factors are key, and security really should be everyone's responsibility. It can't be just one person or one team's responsibility. What are some techniques and methods you've seen be effective in trying to really harbor that partnership across the organization internally as well?
So I can continue on what I was discussing about my team being an extension of our product management group, right? So we're embedding security engineers or cycles from security engineers and security-minded folks into the DevOps teams, into the design process, into product leadership, into Scrum to help make sure that there's functional and non-functional requirements for security from the start, provide the frameworks and expectations and accountabilities to those that are working on developing and maintaining our solutions. And then we're also being transparent on how we're going to perform the checks and the audits and the QA, behind the scenes, so that folks are aware. We're communicating both the minimum, the goals, and where we need to be, and building that into the into our agile processes. That's how we're accomplishing it. And then of course you have your education and coaching that are blended in. But it sounds like it's very simple and it's very slick, but it just takes time, right? You need to be willing to understand and empathize with those that security is not their response. Well, it's not their comfort zone. And so being willing to change your language and operate with their terminology is a tall ask, and it takes time to figure out the right way to communicate and listen and be a partner.
If only there was an easy button that you could press, right? And everyone else comes on board with your plan and strategy. Jay, what about you? What are your thoughts? And are there anything you're doing that you're proud of or has been very effective in that approach?
I think the biggest thing is not being the department of no. I think that's a perception that a lot of people end up with security as a whole. I don't want to talk to them because I'm trying to get my job done and they're going to tell me, no, I can't do that. So I think changing that perception and focusing more on, okay, we can't go that way, but what can we do? How can we do this securely? Let's have that conversation. And I think that's really key, is being able to kind of, as Robert said, have that empathy and understanding that the business is the business. The business is trying to get something done that's going to generate revenue. They're going to do something that is going to get a job or a task done that is, at the end of the day, directed towards generating revenue. So security has to come in and go, okay, we need to accomplish that, but we need to do it securely. So how do we do that? And wrapping around those conversations and understanding the struggles that are happening with it needs to get done fast. And how can we do it securely? One of the biggest success stories I've had with that is that we had some issues with broadcasts that needed to get fixed quickly. And in the past, they had just been told no, and they found workarounds to do things that they weren't happy with. And, you know, we sat down, we talked about it, we figured out a better path forward. And now, you know, I'm having conversations with our broadcast team on a regular basis on, hey, we want to accomplish this. What can we do to do it securely? And that's how they're leading the conversation. I'm not leading that part of the conversation that way. They are, which means that we've already had that initial seed change, and we're starting to see the fruits of having that empathy and having those discussions and understand where they're coming from and their environment needing to be resolved. Their environment having situations that had to be resolved extremely quickly.
It's interesting when you mention that, because I love seeing that transition happen, right? Where your teams start to build trust with you and your organization, and they're willing to collaborate more on anything, right? And they proactively approach you, and they understand the importance of what you're doing. And getting that step to occur, I think, is a crucial part of any business, especially from a cybersecurity perspective. So it's great to hear that example. And I think more people understand that concept, Jay, that you can't be the department of no, but how do you enable the business, but do it in a more secure way? That is a key message. I think that's one of the key takeaways. If anyone has a takeaway from this one, that would be one of the ones I would highlight. Let's talk a little bit more about asset management. It's an area where there are lots of challenges. I often meet with organizations and I ask them, how do you do your asset management? And that ranges from, you know, it's a spreadsheet that someone put together 5 years ago and hasn't been updated, all the way to people trying to use technology to do it more systemically and make sure they have accuracy in their asset management capability. Would love to understand what type of efforts you have, or what type of efforts you're doing today to align your asset and in extension your vulnerability management efforts with the broader risk management and compliance strategies that you have to focus on.
You want me to take that one, Nabil? Or
whoever wants to go first?
We'll attempt to take that one and see where the answer falls. Coming into Hudl, we had a unique opportunity to develop a lot of that from the ground up. There were bits and pieces that were already going on, but we had an opportunity to transform how we approach that. So what our team did was two or three things in parallel, right? You want to understand how the business operates. So we kicked off data mapping and data identification projects throughout the organization. And it was a mixture of process and surveys and talking to individuals, and then looking for some sort of technology component to dynamically keep those processes up to date. And so we mapped out, based on criticality, based on revenue, based on how we knew our internal back office processes and our external products all connected together, right? Between whether it was employees that were developing, servicing, and maintaining some of the microservices, to one-off, maybe a monolith process that's supporting something that only a handful of employees know about. We want to have documentation where all that resides. That allows us to understand how we keep the asset and data visibility and asset management data visibility up to date. And for us, it ended up being a combination of technological capabilities because of the nature of where the data and the assets reside, right? There's likely not one or even two tools sometimes that, if you're looking to have true 100% visibility, you can have it to the level of granularity that you need. And your mileage will vary. Not everybody wants to have it down to that deep level, but when you're dealing with global privacy regulations and subset of those regulations, understanding the ownership, the consent, the element, metadata, and the entire life cycle of not only which employees may need to access said data for support, or customers that are accessing said data, you want that holistic visibility. And then we bring it together, in some of our through some of our playbooks. So we're entirely cloud native, and so it looks a little different. It's a little easier to stitch that together via APIs and playbooks than in some of the, more hybrid cloud environments, but it can be done, just knowing where your infrastructure, your platform, your SaaS, and then your structured and unstructured data, applying your data classification tags and awareness, and just taking your process first and figuring out what can support said process versus starting with technology. Technology is not the answer to your problems more often than not.
Yeah, I think from our side, we're evolving this. This is part of the process of improvement that we're on, trying to figure out a better way to manage all of our assets as a whole, especially because some of the challenges with our assets is they get loaded up on a truck every week and they get taken, hundreds of miles in a different direction. So we've got multiple systems that we're trying to continuously keep updated and that sort of thing. So wherever we can tap into APIs and use mobile device management and things like that to keep track of things, we do. But there's still gaps where we're still kind of having to bust out, here's a spreadsheet for this truck and its inventory and that sort of thing. And, we're working to fix that as best we can, as we continue to evolve the overall systems and our solutions for how we do scoring and things like that. We're trying to simplify what we put on a truck so we don't have as much to keep track of. So, it's a case of, can we get more simplistic even with some things? When it comes to data, that's a beast. I mean, data governance is its own massive, hairy Cthulhu-like beast that has a tendency to be done very, very haphazardly, and you don't necessarily get the data owners and the sort of people and identifications that you need to get. And that's where I think, as Robert said, you have to rely on those processes up front to kind of help guide where that all ends up. Because I don't know if anybody's ever turned on like DLP for like Office 365 and then just cried as massive amounts of alerts come in and half of them are false positives because it's relying on regex to hopefully identify PII, but you never know, right? So it's one of those things where some of the solutions are out there, but data is very difficult because data is not perfect. Data is not a very easy thing to determine what it actually is without some human making that intervention. Maybe it'll get better as AI solutions come out, but it could just get even worse. So we'll see what happens.
So Jay, you walked me right into our next theme, which is playing to win. And this part, I'd love to understand more about the challenge you have, specifically the one you mentioned around false positive and noise. As soon as people start adopting technology and tooling, it offers and promises to do a lot of things, but as we all understand, every automation will have false positives to some degree and require some level of human intervention and human effort to really understand and prioritize them. Can you help us with some strategies that you've seen be successful and have implemented to accurately track and categorize things that you're getting through automation? And I would even take the other way around. What are some things you've tried that maybe didn't work that you would tell others to avoid? Let's start there. And then Rob, would love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is that if you are continuously getting a false positive, look at why and exempt it, and don't not log it, but exempt it. See if there's other events around that make sense. Maybe to alert on even more, or maybe to alert on less. But you can't just take a single alert and get a full story. You need to look at the east and west side of that and see what's going on around an issue. This is where things like Office 360, Defender, and Red Canary and all these other tools that are out there that are able to provide you process explosions, like showing you everything that's touching a process from an execution, are so helpful, because you can see what's going on around that event to understand, like, should we take action on this or should we not? And if we shouldn't, is the tool smart enough to start understanding, as we continue to categorize this as a false positive, to stop alerting us on it on a regular basis and only elevate it when it looks different? If you've got a scheduled task that's going to fire PowerShell, that's going to log into this machine that you have like rated as a high confidentiality, or a high highly confidential machine, then knowing that that script's going to run at 10 p.m. every day, you can kind of exempt that alert. You're expecting that. So take the things that you can expect and tune them down. Because it's much more important that you get the actual signal out of that noise. And because otherwise you're just going to end up in alert fatigue. And I mean, I get enough of it just from, your regular ticket flows and things like that, that now if I'm also looking at my alert flows, there's too much. And if there's too much, then that means that, stuff's going to get missed. And it's the important stuff that's getting missed that you can't allow. You have to find that signal.
We had to spend and continue spending some time taking what we know about the data structures that we have and incorporating those into the technology, so it tries to limit the amount of oddity or abnormalities it alerts. We have been taking the approach, we're not quite there yet, where focusing only on deviations from normal. So we're pushing partners to if you're going to advocate and say you're leveraging the wonderful buzzwords of AI and machine learning, show me how it's true intelligence, because there's a big difference between AI and machine learning. If you're truly leveraging AI, I should be able to use that to understand baselines of my environment, even if those baselines slightly change over time, to help me only focus on what is important. That's how we're building in the the identification and the elimination away from alert fatigue compared to some of the previous paradigms. Again, no single answer. And I think that over time, you're going to see the accuracy and the impact of some of the models some of the vendors are using get better at helping teams like ours to understand where to focus more efforts, what is part of normal behavior. So once you see something like a process running at certain times, even if it's not how our teams would have coded said process, that it's normal behavior. You have a less less urgency around it, unless something else sets off alarms around it. So it's a lot of opportunity in that space. Excited for it to continue getting better.
One of the things I really enjoy is learning from people like yourselves who have been in the industry and are tackling with these problems regularly, is getting examples of real stories where you may have conducted a certain type of an assessment and it allowed you to take those results and really have an impact and have a significant reduction in your cyber risk. Would love to understand from you if there's any stories you can share where you did a certain type of a vulnerability assessment and the results allowed you to have a real impact in your organization.
Sure. Happy to provide a couple of key insights. One of them happened to be, we're a customer of NetSPI, and we partnered with NetSPI several years ago to start doing some of our assessments. It wasn't just an assessment, though. The output of the analysis allowed the teams to coach and educate and talk to each other. And so not only were we able to get the tangible blocking and tackling done, where you're fixing any identified deviations from normal configuration, but you're moving the needle forward and being able to train folks on the underlying why. And so we were able to piece together some behavior changes that lowered the likelihood or the frequency of issues being introduced. So that was a positive benefit from our relationship. So thank you for my team. Another area in a past life was where we were overhauling some of our processes to align with more zero trust guided strategies. And we just started going through business process rationalization and tweaking of rules and accesses. And over time, we were able to see a reduction in the number of exposures that could be taken advantage of. And we conveyed all of these in terms like cyber value at risk and showcasing return on control investment by using minimum, upper, and lower ranges, because obviously the numbers can vary, and there's a lot of interpretation that go into some of the risk calculations. But we try to convey those, because that's the biggest key, is taking all this goodness that our security teams can talk about and solidifying the trust and confidence that our senior leadership teams have in us, and making sure that I'm speaking up, giving kudos to the teams, and helping to raise the level of confidence that the investments are in the right spot for our teams.
So I haven't had so much. I don't really have any examples from the tour with this that I can really discuss. But in past lives, one of the big ones that that always comes to mind when I start talking about like the value of having third parties come in and do full analysis and vulnerabilities testing against your environment is we had a firm come in and perform a test, and they found a 2008 not R2 but 2008 Windows server that had been kind of abandoned and left over in the corner, that was running some old version of SQL that was able to be used as part of a attack chain to essentially get to DA. And so it's those sort of things where it's like there's something that's in your environment that maybe has been forgotten. Maybe it's on a different subnet that you're not scanning with some sort of asset tool to see what's on that environment. You're not scanning it with vulnerability, something. And it is just sitting there, legacy. It doesn't even necessarily have a purpose, but it's still turned on because no one bothered to turn it off because no one remembers why it's there. And so it's sometimes those things, which are, again, it goes back to low-hanging fruit and script kiddies, right? If somebody can run an nmap and find that because you're just not paying attention, and then exploit it because they were able to get into your network for whatever reason, now you have an incident on your hand that you don't want to have to deal with. That could have very easily been avoided. So it's trying to make sure that you're bringing those people in to kind of make sure that those things aren't happening, that you haven't forgotten about something that, we're going to get to that later. Well, later is now, and it's better to go ahead and get that report and start working through it and addressing those issues before somebody else does who you're not paying to do it for you.
Love it. Those make a lot of sense, and love the stories, obviously. And we have many to share, but that could be an episode in itself, I think, just sharing war stories of things we've seen in the wild and how they were exploited. I would
definitely
love to
tune into that.
Well, that might be part 2 of this webinar then. There might be a part 2 where we just talk about war stories. I think that would be a fun episode. So we'll let our marketing team know to plan for that one. The last topic and theme I want to jump onto is around scoring success and really understanding how organizations measure the effectiveness of what they're doing. Now, I understand that every organization, their businesses differ, and they look at different KPIs and metrics that add value to their decision-making process. I want to kind of ask a question in a different way to both of you, which is, what measurements do you find give you the most insight into how effective your efforts and your cybersecurity program is? If there are certain ones you can share, would love to learn from you if there are specific examples of measurements that you like to use on a regular basis to make sure that you're being effective.
I think one of the biggest ones I always look at is incident response time. From an alert firing to us determining whether it's a true positive or a false positive, that to me is critical. And then from there, what is the remediation time? That's important. If we can keep that sub 20 minutes, then we're doing well. If we can get that under 5, then we're doing exceptional. So that's where I'm always trying to drive things, is how can we get that to the lowest number possible? Kill that dwell time for an attacker. The other big thing that I try to look at is how effective are our tool sets? Are we getting value out of them? Are they the right tools for what we're trying to accomplish with them? And have we maximized the total solution that they provide to us? Because it's one thing to have, the greatest tools ever, but if you're only getting 20% out of them, are they the right tools for what you're trying to accomplish? So that's another one I look at, because if I can roll multiple tools into one and save capital, then I'm going to have a better program as a whole if we're maximizing that tool usage.
Rob, what about yourself?
Yeah, so piggyback on avoiding shelfware. We convey that in just the terms, control and return on investment of said control. And so I bundle and like to think about my processes and technologies as varying degrees of controls. And if we're being highly effective and efficient at using those capabilities, I should be able to provide either qualitative or quantitative, some value, some measure of confidence in how they're performing to justify, as Jay mentioned, the continued investment. Do you replace? Do you consolidate? Do you look at something new? We do also try to convey adherence to target SLAs for the identification, detection, and resolution. So also very, very similar to what Jay had mentioned. I want to make sure that we're conveying it in terms of, hey, we have like the bar is, hey, we need to know within X number of hours you have regulatory and customer obligations to, if for some reason there's ever notification periods, and you got to set your process up to work back from that at a minimum, right? But that's not our goal. We just want to make sure that we have that gauge. We know how we're performing. We know what our resilience looks like, because we want to operate within the right threshold. So that's the last piece, is when we start trying to convey, how we're operating, the risk thresholds of what our incident activities look like versus where our unacceptable thresholds are. So there's a wide variety of different parameters. The last one, which I do enjoy reporting on this one, that we're building up historical tracking, is that the number of human reported incidents. I love when those trend upwards, because it means there's engagement and communication. And so we do like to share, hey, the number of employee reported incidents, rose, 20, 30%. And we try to tie that to awareness training, or we try to tie that to some other campaign to show that we're having a positive effect. We're never hoping it's going to be a positive incident that has a large impact, but you want to foster that and show that activities that all of the security teams and leaders are doing are moving the needle in the right direction and justifying the value and investment organizations are making.
Yeah, I kind of want to piggyback on a story with that, and getting user engagement and increasing the overall user reports. Last year for Security Awareness Month, October's coming up. What we did at the tour is we actually took people fishing. We took them deep sea fishing, and to get a ticket to win, you had to report fish, because we increased the number of fishing tests we ran for the month, and we also offered additional trainings through the month. So if you completed additional trainings, you got a ticket. And we raffled off a chance to go fishing. I don't know how we're going to top that this year, but we're trying to figure that out right now. But by doing things like that, though, you create that incentive to engage your user base to report those findings. And again, it comes back to that whole thing of, we need to be a blameless and focus on the issues and encourage people to report issues. So getting that engagement, making sure people are responding to the things that are happening that they see, because guess what? I can't read everybody's email. I don't want to. So making sure that they're reporting those findings, even if it's a false positive, it's better that they're clicking that button and reporting it than they're not.
Love it. Love that story. I think an extension of that, Jay, if you want some silly ideas from me, I think when you take them fishing, you should have a bunch of fake food menus that have QR codes that go to more fishing training, and then tell them that they shouldn't just be scanning random QR codes and following the link there.
We might do that. We might see if we can put the cafe menu up as a QR code and see how many people we can get to scan it.
Love it. Well, thank you both for all your insights. I know we're running up against time. I want to take a quick moment, not only to thank you both, but also to try and maybe summarize what we've discussed today. We understand that security is hard. There's no silver bullet. And clearly you have to use a combination of various tools, but it's not just technology. People, process are equally important. In order to unite the team, you can't be the team that just says no and becomes a blocker in your organization. Jay, love that phrase. Instead, let's work on collaborating and enabling broader education and understanding of why security is important, just like every other part of the business, and how can you enable the business to do what they do more securely. You have to play to win. You have to do various different things to implement a strategy. Obviously, every organization will have unique business objectives, but there are common themes and common challenges I think we all face that we can start as a baseline as we get started on the cybersecurity journey. And lastly, you have to measure what you're doing. If you're not measuring what you're doing, you don't know how effective it is, and you don't know if there's any value coming out of all the investment you're making in cyber. Hopefully I categorize that accurately for both of you. I do want to get to some questions that we received. We won't have time to get to all of them, but let's get to one, and we can maybe make it a rapid fire answer round for both of you. So the question we have is, how do you differentiate between false alarms and actual incidents during the detection process, and how has it been refined over time? So Jay, we'll start off with you, and then Rob, you can wrap us up.
That's hard to boil down quickly, right? It really boils down to analysis at that point and looking at the alert and seeing a trend. And if you see that alert pop up on a regular basis, tuning it down. And that's really the best that you can do, is just continue to do the analysis and try to reduce the noise.
Yeah, exactly. Focusing on is a normal behavior? How far away from normal is it? And this is one of the areas I push partners to help me do some of the deep level investigation on. Right, we're concerned with the more obvious, the large deviations, the more minute ones. I'm relying on partners to help me focus in on time, but it's just refining those parameters that are alerting us over time and trying to enhance the accuracy, with blood, sweat, and tears.
Love it. Well, thank you both. We truly appreciate you being a guest and making this a wonderful webinar. Hopefully our audience also has enjoyed listening to you and learning from you like I have. Julie, I'll pass it back to you.
Thank you all once again. Thanks, Rob, Jay, and Nabil, for your great discussion today. Just a reminder, any questions we weren't able to get to live, we'll make sure that Rob and Jay get access to those and can follow up via email. And we'll also be sending an email with the recording from today's session if you'd like to rewatch or share with others. So with that, everyone have a great day, and thank you so much for being here.